Here at the Childhood Cancer Caucus, I am seen with...
My name is Beth Baber from the Nicholas Connor Institute.
Well, Beth Ann, very pleasure to talk to you here. Tell folks a little bit more about why you're here today at the Childhood Cancer Caucus in Washington, D.C. I'd love to hear that.
Right, I think the Childhood Cancer Caucus is very important. It brings together the community of patient advocacy groups, those groups that are involved in research at the NIH and NCI, as well as other organizations that may support the efforts to move things forward and get things in the clinic for the kids.
And so I've met several folks today and how pediatric cancer has impacted their life. Tell folks how pediatric cancer has impacted your life and been involved with your family.
So my basic training is I'm a cancer researcher. I was at the Salk Institute in San Diego, California. My husband is also a cancer researcher. Oh, wow. Okay. And as we were doing what we would do to help those other patients with cancer and just make those discoveries, my own son was diagnosed with neuroblastoma.
Okay. How old was he?
He was 15 months old at the time.
Yeah, so barely walking, just had learned
he
to
was
walk,
just barely walking, and in fact, his first two-syllable word was in the hospital. So it was really, I don't know why, but I kind of felt maybe since I was a cancer researcher that cancer wouldn't touch me so personally, but it did. But it provided, our background provided a very interesting way we pursued in treating our son. We treated him based on our scientific knowledge and the drugs that he was being given.
That's really amazing that you were hit by this tragic, childhood cancer that came into your lives, and you were already in the research in the field, right?
Right, and I think what was so frustrating for my husband and I is that we knew of discoveries, biomarkers that are in academia that have been published in papers. We assumed that when we were told the bad news, that those things would be available for him. The shock really came was when they're telling us that the only drugs that he can have are 30 to 40-year-old therapy that have been 30 to 40 years old and are being used at almost 10 times the adult level.
How does that impact someone so young at a year and a half?
So the chemotherapy drugs are designed to target rapidly growing cells. Cancer cells are rapidly growing. A 15-month-old has a lot of rapidly growing cells. So the cancer drugs are not only targeting the cancer, they're also inducing mutations into every normal cell in the child's body. This leads to a high incidence of secondary cancers that are actually derived from the primary treatments.
And how old is your son today?
My son, I'm very proud to say, he's 8 years old.
Wow. Okay.
We took, because of our background, the histology on his tumor suggested that he should be treated very aggressively. The limited knowledge that we had in terms of markers suggested otherwise. He was negative. We put our faith in on the genetics, and we treated him with standard chemotherapy. We didn't do the 10x dose. Therefore, he is 8 years old and not suffering the long-term side effects that are associated with many of these cancer treatments.
So tell folks also what kind of foundation or organizations that you're involved in, or if you've started or committed to.
So when he finished his treatments, and then through our knowledge of, and the frustration of seeing that things in academia were not available, I really kind of looked into why is that not happening. I just assumed that naturally it goes from bench through industry and into the clinic to help the kids. I was shocked to understand the reason why was the patient population is very small. It's very difficult for industry to make a case to its investors to invest into a product that you have maybe 600 patients a year versus 250,000 patients per year.
Which are mostly likely adults,
right?
A larger pool.
Exactly.
That's why we're here today, to be educated and learn how we can help in the fact that it seems that pediatric cancer is underfunded in research and finding cures and treatments. There's just not a lot out there.
Right, and
so that's why we're here today.
It's based on the incidence, the percentage-wise. Unfortunately, maybe let's say, for example, breast cancer, where you have 250,000 women that are diagnosed per year, and pediatric cancer, you have about 13,000 kids. Now, when we say pediatric cancer, it's almost 60 different cancers.
Wow.
So
I love how you can encompass it all together then.
So when you're saying a little bit of funding for all of pediatric cancer, it's actually a very, very tiny percent of funding for any one particular type of cancer.
That's the challenges we have today.
And that's
forward.
a challenge, yes.
Okay.
It's a challenge for the private sector. And so I think with acts like Creating Hope Acts, providing incentives for industry to get more involved. I think additionally more incentives need to be placed to lower that barrier rate. I think once we have the private sector fully engaged, we can see a rapid amount of acceleration.
I agree with you that the Creating Hope Act that was signed this year by congressional members and the president, hopefully this will help speed the process or show some hope in getting more better treatments for young children with cancer, and that's why we're here today.
And so you asked me about what am I doing to move it forward, and seeing that there is this gap between academia and the clinic, and how we need to move that gap, and there's not very much funding, and there's not very much industry involvement. The purpose of the Nicholas Connor Institute is to, through collaborative mechanisms, get the private sector more involved, to de-risk their investment, and then it helps lower that barrier. So it's basically looking for those discoveries and technology and academia or early stage industry that's been shelved because investors don't want to move it forward, and then looking for certain types of funding and matching the funding with the technology and getting companies involved in a collaborative effort. Hopefully we can transverse that valley of death.
Well, I must say, Beth Ann, that it was great to be here today because I learned so much, and I feel much more educated and aware of the challenges that pediatric cancer faces, and one never knows when they can speak somewhere or be an advocate in a room or meet someone where they might make a difference just by knowing one more thing about it. And so I have learned a lot today in the last 2 weeks since I've learned about this cause.
And I really appreciate your efforts in getting this out to the general public, because I really think it's more awareness that we can generate and have the public understand the current situation. We might be able to make the change even quicker.
I agree. Understanding and awareness. So thank you again, Beth Ann, for meeting with me. Pleasure.
Excuse me. Excuse me?
There are some things you can't control.
The weather.
The front page.
Cell phones ringing.
Traffic.
The stock market, obviously.
Hearing they love you.
Or they don't.
We're hearing the one thing no one wants to hear.
Cancer.
Okay, things you can control.
What you know before treatment.
Your options.
All the facts.
There's a high risk of infection during chemotherapy.
So don't let anything interrupt your fight against cancer.
Get prepared.
Get healthy.
Stay strong.
Stay well.
Talk to your doctors.
And go to manageyourtreatment.com.
There are some things you can't control.
But this, you honestly can.